June 1812. Europe's largest army embarks on an unprecedented campaign. 600,000 soldiers. France, Poland, Italy, Germany, Holland, Switzerland. Gathered from all over Europe. The target, Russia. The commander, Napoleon Bonaparte, master of Europe, emperor of emperors. Napoleon had already conquered most of Europe. He had defeated Austria, crushed Prussia, and seized Spain. But one enemy remained, Tsar Alexander I's Russia. And Napoleon was making a mistake. He was declaring war on Russia before winter set in. No one could have known then. Only 30,000 of those 600,000 men would return. The rest, they would freeze, they would starve, they would disappear. And thousands would remain buried beneath the ice in Russian soil forever. This is the story of Napoleon's frozen army. It is the most tragic military disaster in history. And even today, the bodies of those soldiers are emerging from Russia's frozen ground. The ice preserved them, time froze them, and kept them waiting. And now, the climate is changing, the glaciers are melting, and the lost soldiers are surfacing. At the beginning of 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte was 42 years old. He was Emperor of France. He had been conquering Europe for 10 years. He had won at Austerlitz, destroyed the Prussians at Jena, and subdued Austria at Wagram. But there was one problem: Russia. Tsar Alexander was not complying with Napoleon's continental system, the Continental Blockade. He was trading with England. For Napoleon, this was unacceptable. England was his only enemy, and Russia was helping England. "If I take Moscow, Russia will kneel," Napoleon said. "Within 3 weeks, the Tsar will ask for peace, and I will be the ruler of all Europe." But Napoleon had not taken one thing into account: Russian strategy, the scorched earth policy, and, most importantly, general winter. In June 1812, the Grande Armée, the Grand Army, crossed the Niemen River. 600,000 soldiers, 200,000 horses, thousands of cannons, thousands of wagons. The largest army the human eye had ever seen. Napoleon, on horseback, looked at his army. He was proud. This army was invincible, or so he thought. July 1812. The army was advancing into Russian territory, but something strange was happening. The Russians weren't fighting. They were retreating. They were retreating from every city, every village. And as they left, they were burning everything. Fields were being burned. Grain barns were being burned. Villages were being emptied. Houses set on fire. The Russians were leaving Napoleon's army with nothing. No food, no shelter, no fodder. This strategy was known as the scorched earth policy. It was General Mikhail Kutuzov's plan to slowly destroy the enemy without fighting them, through hunger, exhaustion, and distance. Napoleon's soldiers began to complain. Food was running out. The horses were weakening. They were marching 30 to 40 kilometers a day under the hot sun, on dusty roads. And the Russian army was still far away. At the end of July, they reached Smolensk. The first major battle took place there. The city was under heavy bombardment. Napoleon won. But the Russians fled again, and Smolensk was burning. "Where are these Russians?" Napoleon asked. "Why aren't they fighting?" His commanders warned him, "Your Majesty, we are advancing too far. The supply lines are too long. Winter is still far off, but we must wait here. We will continue in the spring." But Napoleon did not listen. "Moscow," he said. "If we take Moscow, we win. Let's advance." And the army continued marching toward death. The 7th of September, 1812, 125 kilometers from Moscow, the village of Borodino. Finally, the Russians halted. They would fight. Two armies faced each other. 130,000 French soldiers, 120,000 Russian soldiers. At dawn, the artillery fire began. The Battle of Borodino was the bloodiest of the Napoleonic Wars. In a single day, 70,000 people were killed or wounded. 70,000. The fields were filled with corpses. Blood mixed with the soil. French General Caulaincourt wrote in his diary, "Hell must be better than this. All around is death, the cries of the wounded, the sounds of dying horses. This is more than a man can bear." By the end of the day, Napoleon had won. Technically, the Russians retreated, but Napoleon's army was devastated, 30,000 casualties. And worse, the Russians had escaped again. They had not been destroyed. Napoleon looked out over the battlefield from his horse. Corpses were scattered everywhere the eye could see, and he was deep in thought. Perhaps he realized then he couldn't win this war. But it was too late. Moscow was only a few days away, and Napoleon couldn't turn back. He would never turn back. The 14th of September, 1812. Moscow. Napoleon looked out over the city from its heights. The Kremlin towers glowed like gold. The city was silent. It was empty. "Where is the people?" he asked. "Where are the Tsar's envoys to bring our peace offer?" There was no answer, because Moscow had been evacuated. Hundreds of thousands of people had left the city by order of the Tsar, and there was a secret plan in the city. That night, Moscow began to burn. Fires broke out everywhere, simultaneously. The Russians were burning their own capital to leave Napoleon nothing. For 5 days, Moscow burned. 3/4 of the city was reduced to ashes. Palaces, churches, houses, everything. Napoleon's army tried to extinguish the fire, but it was impossible. The wind fanned the flames. Napoleon sat in the Kremlin. Outside, the city was burning, and inside, he was accepting a reality. He had not won. The Tsar did not want peace. The Russians were not giving up, and winter was coming. "What should I do?" he asked his generals. "We must retreat, Your Majesty," they said, "immediately. Otherwise, we won't make it through the winter." Napoleon waited a month. He waited for a miracle, a letter from the Tsar, an offer of peace, but nothing came. The 19th of October, 1812, Napoleon gave the order. "We are retreating. We are returning to France." But it was too late. Much, much too late. Late October, the army left Moscow. Only 100,000 soldiers remained. Half had died in battle, half had died of disease or deserted, and the weather was starting to turn cold. The first snow fell in late October. The soldiers were still wearing their summer uniforms, because Napoleon had said, "We'll be back before winter." But they hadn't. And now, at -20 degrees, they were walking in thin cloth garments. Every day, hundreds of soldiers were dying. They were freezing to death, falling to the ground, never to rise again. Their comrades left them behind and continued on, because stopping meant dying. A French officer, Philippe de Ségur, wrote, "The roads were littered with corpses. Horses were dying of starvation. People were eating dead horse meat. Some were killing each other for shoes, because shoes meant life. Without shoes, feet froze and became gangrenous." November was even worse. The temperature dropped to -30, then -40. The soldiers no longer resembled soldiers. They were creatures in rags, with unkempt beards, sunken eyes, and skeletal frames. Many soldiers fell asleep while walking, and never woke up. They froze to death. Their bodies remained by the roadside. The snow covered them, and they disappeared. Thousands disappeared like this, nameless, graveless, only beneath the ice. The 26th of November, 1812. The BEREZINA River, Belarus, the final obstacle for Napoleon's army. The bridges had been destroyed by the Russians, and the river was partially frozen, but not completely. Beneath the ice, water flowed, deadly, freezing water. French engineers attempted to build bridges. In -30 degrees, in ice-cold water, many froze to death. But they finished the bridges. 2 bridges, one for soldiers, one for wagons. And the army began to cross. But the Russian army was coming from both sides. The trap was closing. November 27 to 28. 2 days, 2 hellish days. As the soldiers tried to cross the bridge, Russian artillery fired. Shells fell into the crowd. People panicked. They pushed and shoved. Some fell off the bridge into the icy water. The screams were horrific. You could only last a few minutes in the freezing water. Then your body would shut down, and you would sink. Thousands died in the BEREZINA, drowned, frozen, crushed, the river filled with corpses. And the river flowed, carrying the bodies away, burying them under the ice. Napoleon crossed over, with 50,000 soldiers, but 50,000 more were left behind. They became prisoners of the Russians, or died. And the bridges were burned. There was no hope left for those who remained. December 1812. The army was approaching the Polish border, but there was no army anymore. Only a raid, an escape, a death march. December 14. Napoleon abandoned the army. He returned to Paris, secretly, because in France he needed to raise a new army, because everyone thought he was dead. He left command to Murat, but Murat also fled a few days later. The army was left to fend for itself, every man for himself. To survive. The 25th of December, 1812. Christmas Day, the remnants of the army crossed the Niemen River. The same river that 600,000 people had crossed 6 months earlier. Now, only 30,000 were crossing. 570,000 soldiers had been lost. 570,000, the greatest military disaster in history. Some had died in battle, some from disease, some had been taken prisoner, but most had frozen to death. They had vanished in Russia's endless winter lands, beneath the ice, forever. The war ended, years passed, but Russia's soil did not forget. In the 1942, during World War II, German troops were passing along the same roads, and they noticed something strange. Old corpses were emerging from the ground. The corpses of Napoleon's soldiers, 100 years later, still recognizable, because the permafrost, the permanently frozen ground, had preserved them. Like a refrigerator, it had stopped the decay. In 2001, Vilnius, Lithuania, construction workers discovered a mass grave. Over 2,000 bodies, all Napoleon soldiers, all buried at the same time. All died without winter clothing. Anthropologists examined the bodies. Horrific truths emerged. Many were young men, aged 20 to 25. Most of their bones showed signs of cold damage. Some had typhus bacteria in their bodies. Many had empty stomachs, they had starved to death. Some had no feet, they had been amputated due to gangrene. One young man's skull drew particular attention. He was 19 years old, Italian. His skull showed signs of trauma. He had probably fallen while walking, hit his head on a rock, and frozen to death. No one had buried him. Only snow covered him. In 2012, another mass grave was found on the BORODINO battlefield. 300 soldiers, Russians and French mixed together, enemies buried together in death. Modern science has learned a great deal from these frozen bodies. DNA analysis was performed. The soldiers' origins were identified. France, Italy, Poland, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Germany, all of Europe. Some of their descendants were found. 200 years later, an Italian family learned that their great-great-grandfather had died in Russia, and DNA testing proved it. Isotope analysis showed what they ate. During the retreat, they ate horse meat. Evidence was even found that some ate human tissue. Cannibalism to survive. Bone analysis showed how they died. Hypothermia, a drop in body temperature. The body shivers first, then the shivering stops. Then numbness sets in. then sleep, and then death. Many soldiers died in their sleep. They had stopped to sit and rest, just for a minute, but they never woke up again. The snow covered them, and they slept forever. Typhus, another great killer. The disease ravaged the army. High fever, delirium, diarrhea, weak, hungry, cold. Typhus could kill in a week. 30% of the bodies in the Vilnius mass grave had died of typhus. Numbers sometimes hide the truth. 570,000 dead. But each one was a person. Each had a story. Jean-Baptiste Depenthan, 22 years old, from the Burgundy region of France. Infantry soldier. Drafted in March 1812. Marched to Russia in June. He fought at Borodino in September. He crossed the BEREZINA in November. In December, he disappeared near Vilnius. His body was found in 2001. His stomach was empty. He had died of exposure. He had written a letter to his mother in October. "Dear Mother, I am very tired. There is no food. It's very cold. But I won't give up. The Emperor trusts us. I'll come home. Don't worry. My never AA and Welltown. The Emperor trusts us." He didn't come home. Francois Pills, 19 years old, from Holland, cavalry. His horse died in November. He kept walking. His feet froze. He got gangrene. His friends tried to carry him, but he was too heavy. They had to leave him. Francois sat by the roadside. It was snowing. "Go," he said. "You can't save me. Go." And his friends left, because staying meant dying together. Francois's body was never found. Perhaps it still lies beneath the snow. Napoleon's frozen army became legendary in Russian literature, French literature, music, art. Lev Tolstoy wrote about it in his book War and Peace. The horror of retreat, the frozen soldiers, the helplessness. Tchaikovsky composed the 1812 overture, cannon fire, victory bells, the Russian national anthem. To celebrate Napoleon's defeat, French painter Vasily Vereshchagin created horrific paintings. Soldiers frozen in the snow, roads littered with corpses, birds of prey. One painting is particularly famous, Napoleon's Retreat, white, endless snow, and in the middle, a single silhouette, a corpse, frozen, forgotten, lost. The story was told for generations. In Russia, it became a story of national pride. The story of General Winter protected us. In France, it became a tragic lesson, the story of the price of arrogance. And the soldiers. The soldiers were not forgotten. Every winter in Russia, people remember them, because still, thousands lie beneath the snow. 21st century, a new phenomenon, global warming. Russia's permafrost regions are melting. The permanently frozen ground is no longer permanent. Temperatures are rising. Summers are hotter. Winters are shorter. And the ground is revealing its secrets. In 2015, near Smolensk, a farmer plowing his field found something strange. Bones, dozens of bones, and uniform buttons, French uniform buttons. Archaeologists were called in. Excavations were carried out. 50 soldiers were found, all in a mass grave. All died in the winter of 1812. In 2018, another grave. In 2020, another. Every year, more bodies are found because the ice is melting. After 200 years, the ground is releasing them. Scientists estimate that thousands more bodies will be found over the next 50 years because Siberia's permafrost is melting rapidly. This is an unexpected consequence of climate change. History is literally coming to the surface. In Russia, in France, in Europe, there are monuments to Napoleon's defeat. In Moscow, the Borodino Battlefield Monument, a huge pyramid. The inscription reads, "Here, 70,000 men died for the fatherland." In Vilnius, a new monument was erected in 2003. Monument to Napoleon's soldiers, a simple, plain stone. The inscription reads, "They came from afar, They died on foreign soil. May they rest in peace. In Paris, at Les Invalides, Napoleon's tomb stands. Magnificent, enormous, made of red marble, but around it are small plaques. Each bears the name of a campaign. Austerlitz, Jena, Wagram, and finally, Russia, 1,812. 570,000 casualties. Every year, on September 14, the day Moscow fell, a ceremony is held at BORODINO. Russian and French associations come together. They lay wreaths, 2 minutes of silence, because to forget is to kill them a second time. Napoleon's Russian disaster is one of history's most important lessons. First lesson, arrogance. Napoleon believed he was invincible. "I am Napoleon Bonaparte. Nothing can stop me," he said. But Russia stopped him. Winter stopped him. Nature stopped him. Second lesson, logistics. Feeding an army of 600,000 men was impossibly difficult. Every day, tons of bread, meat, and fodder were needed. The supply lines were very long, and the Russians were burning everything. Napoleon hadn't taken this into account. Third lesson, climate. The Russian winter was no myth. It was real. -30, -40 degrees. The human body cannot withstand that, especially a body that is hungry, tired, and poorly dressed. Fourth lesson, don't underestimate the enemy. Napoleon considered the Russians primitive. A few victories, and they'll give up, he said. But the Russians didn't give up. Even when their capital burned, they didn't give up, because they were defending their homeland. These lessons were taught to future leaders, but some didn't listen. In 1941, Adolf Hitler made the same mistake. He attacked Russia. "We'll take Moscow in 3 months," he said. He didn't. Winter came. The German army froze. Just like Napoleon's army, history repeats itself, especially if lessons are not learned. Translated with deepl.com, free version. Let's imagine. November 1812, somewhere in Russia. You are a 20-year-old French soldier. You've been marching for 6 months. You started in Paris. You passed through Germany. You crossed Poland. You entered Russia, thousands of kilometers. At first, you were excited. Adventure, victory, with the Emperor. But now you just want to survive. Your friends are dying, one by one. Yesterday, Pierre died of typhus. Today, Jacques is missing, probably frozen to death. Tomorrow, it might be you. You can't feel your feet anymore. Frozen, probably gangrenous, but you don't dare look, because you know, if it's gangrene, you'll die, slowly, in agony. You're hungry. The last thing you ate was a horse that died 3 days ago. Raw. There was no wood to make a fire. Just bloody, frozen meat. But you ate it anyway. Because hunger is stronger than pride. And the cold, God, the cold, it penetrates your bones. You're shivering. But you know, shivering is good. Because when you stop shivering, you start freezing. In front of you, endless white. Behind you, endless white. Everywhere is the same. The road is littered with corpses. Familiar ones, unfamiliar ones. You don't care anymore. You just walk. And you think, will my mother remember me? Will my village remember me? Or will they just say, he disappeared in Russia? Probably the latter. One more step. One more step. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe today. But don't stop. Because stopping means dying. And finally, you stop. Because you can't take it anymore. You sit down under a tree. Just for a minute. Just to rest. Your eyes close. You're so tired. And the cold isn't so bad anymore. In fact, it feels warm. Strange. You fall asleep, and you never wake up again. Snow covers you, slowly, silently, and you disappear, forever. 212 years have passed. But the story is not over. Every year, news comes from Russia. New Napoleonic military remains have been found. While plowing fields, building roads, constructing buildings, the Earth has a memory. It does not forget. Archaeologists learn new things from every discovery. DNA technology is advancing. Now, just from bones, it is possible to determine a person's hair color, eye color, height, age, and where they came from. And some families, 200 years later, are learning what happened to their great-great-grandfathers. A French family learned in 2019 that their ancestor was found in Vilnius. The DNA test showed a 99.9% match. The family went to Russia. They visited their ancestor's grave. They left flowers. They cried. After 200 years, a circle was closed. These stories are important because they remind us war is not just about numbers. Every loss is a person, a family, a future. Napoleon's frozen army is frequently seen in popular culture. Films War and Peace, 1956, 1967, 2016 versions. All of them show the retreat scene. Horrific, freezing scenes. Books. In addition to Tolstoy, dozens of novels have been written. Napoleon in Russia, The Retreat, 1812, Adam Zamoyski's historical account, documentaries, BBC, National Geographic, History Channel, all have covered the subject, archaeological findings, scientific analyses, dramatic reconstructions, video games. The Total War series features a Napoleon campaign. The Russia section is the most challenging because it accurately reflects history. Winning is nearly impossible. Music. Metal bands have written songs. Frozen Army, 1812. Napoleon's Nightmare. Epic, dramatic, tragic. Why is it so popular? Because the story contains universal themes: pride and fall, power and helplessness, victory and disaster, man and nature. And most importantly, it reminds us that no matter how powerful we are, nature is more powerful. Winter is more powerful than kings. Modern military academies still teach about Napoleon's Russian disaster because the lessons are timeless. 1. Extended supply lines. If the distance between the front and the main base is too long, logistics collapse. When Napoleon reached Moscow, he was 2,500 kilometers away from Paris. Impossible. 2. Fighting on enemy territory. If the local population is hostile, everything becomes more difficult. The Russians did not support the French. In fact, they formed partisan groups and attacked supply convoys. 3. The climate factor. Weather conditions are critical in war planning. Napoleon said, "We'll be back before winter." But he couldn't, and winter became the greatest enemy. 4. Morale and motivation. Hunger, cold, and despair can break even the best army. Napoleon's soldiers were motivated at first, but after months, they just wanted to survive. 5. Strategic retreat. The Russians retreated without fighting. Napoleon thought this was weakness, but it was strategy. The draw the enemy deep, then destroy them strategy. These lessons were also seen in World War II. Hitler repeated Napoleon's mistakes. The Wehrmacht stopped before Moscow. Winter destroyed them too. History teaches. But learning is up to the individual. 2023. Latest news. May 2023. In Smolensk Oblast, a new mass grave was discovered after a forest fire. 120 bodies. Archaeologists conducted an excavation. An interesting detail: they all died together. Probably overnight. Probably due to a sudden snowstorm. September 2023. Near Borodino, metal detector hobbyists found something strange. An old trunk. Inside, letters. In French, dated 1812. Letters from a soldier to his mother. Never sent. That soldier probably died, and the letters were buried with him. One letter is particularly touching. Mother dear, I am very afraid, but I cannot tell anyone. Men cannot show fear, but I can tell you, because you understand me. If I die, know that I loved you very much. And please tell Marie that I never forgot her. That soldier died. Marie probably waited her whole life. The letter never reached her. Scientists estimate that hundreds of thousands of bodies are still waiting to be found. Most are deep in Siberia, under the permafrost. As climate change accelerates, more will emerge. By 2050, perhaps 50,000 more. And each one is a story. Each one is a family. Each one is forgotten, but now remembered. Napoleon's frozen army, 570,000 casualties. The greatest military disaster in history. But it's not just a number. Each one was a human being. Jean, 22 years old. François, 19. Pierre, 25. Michel, 18. Thousands of names, thousands of stories. They went for victory. But they found only death. They died in a foreign land, cold, hungry, alone. And many were never even buried. Only snow covered them, then ice, then time. Today, 200 years later, the earth is giving them back. Slowly, one by one, and we remember them, because to forget is to kill them a second time. Napoleon returned to Paris. He built new armies. He fought new wars. But he never forgot Russia. On the island of St. Helena, in exile, in his final days, he said, "Russia, she was my greatest mistake. I took 600,000 men, 30,000 returned. The rest are under the ice." And they still are. Some were found. Some are still there. In Russia's endless lands, under snow and ice, forever. But they were not forgotten. They will never be forgotten. They marched into winter, and winter hid them.